My fellow people and audience, those who are interested in this program, I welcome you back to this presentation in which we are doing everything possible to portray the truth of our people, the people of this former British Southern Cameroon, the children of Ambazonia. We want to update ourselves and update the world about the true facts concerning us, as well as let us know that we are an integral part of the universe. We're not just a group of people isolated somewhere, abandoned to themselves and being maltreated by some wicked individuals. We are an integral part of the universe. In the previous program, we were able to demonstrate about the universe, how big and large it is, constituted of actually an observable universe by human beings, and there is a non-observable human universe that humans have not been able to assess. And it is imagined that what we as humans know of the universe is less than 1% of what is out there. And what we do know is already regarded as constituting several universes, each of them made up of billions of Milky Ways. And we also know that each Milky Way is made up of billions of stars. And where we are located on planet Earth is, we are an integral part of the Milky Way galaxy, as they call it. And in this galaxy, we have over 200 billion stars and over 3.1 billion planets. So the Earth on which we live is only a very infinitesimally small portion of that universe. We were even able to demonstrate size in the universe to show that the size of our Earth is so small compared to all the other bodies that, sometimes we think too highly of ourselves. We try to think that everything revolves around us and that we're very important, when, as far as the God who created the entire universe, we are infinitesimally small and almost insignificant. And yet, he takes each one of us very special and unique and basically considers us special to him. That's why as we know that he created us in his image, and as we are transformed to be like him, he will allow us to enjoy that universe that he has created. But anyway, as I said, we want to bring the story of our people, the children of Ambazonia, and the territory of the land of Ambazonia, as I said, is constituted on planet Earth, the small planet Earth compared to the rest of the other bodies out there in the universe. And here on planet Earth, the Earth is constituted of so many different parts. You have the surface that we live on and that we know about, which is very, very small, less than 1% of the entirety of the planet Earth. And of the surface of that Earth, 1/3 of it is made up of the mass. That means the land mass on which you see human beings and activities taking place. The majority of it, 2/3, is constituted of water, which we know as the oceans, the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian Oceans, and so many other masses of water. The water surface on planet Earth constitutes 2/3 of the surface of the Earth, and the human portion that is inhabited as considered as landmass is only 1/3. And of this 1/3 landmass on planet Earth, we have different planets, and you have the planet Earth, Africa. That is where the children of Ambazonia are located. And so today we want to go into the story of Africa so that we know how our people migrated to where we are located today. In fact, Africa is considered as the biggest planet on Earth. That means that the landmass of Africa can take the entirety of North America, that means the United States, as well as even Russia and China, and there will still be space to take up the European Union, the land mass of the western part of Europe. And so Africa is extremely very large and unique. It is located in the center, where the equator, the dividing portion of the line that separates the northern portion of our planet from the southern portion of our Earth, goes across Africa. And this equator is located just 8 degrees below the position the land of Amazonia is located. And the land of Amazonia on the African continent is currently considered to be a portion of what is called the nation of Cameroon, just to the east of Nigeria. Nigeria is to the west of the land of Amazonia. And we will be able to give a lot of information that will show the people who we truly are. We are authentic Africans who migrated to our current territories where we are located. And so today, we want to give the story of the people of Africa. And so I would like to present a video here that will talk about the origins of the people of Africa, or sub-Saharan Africa, the dark-skinned people of Africa, to which the children of Amazonia belong. Let's watch that one video about the origin of the children of Africa.
Were rewritten by colonial hands, there lived a people whose roots reached deep into the foundation of civilization. These were the descendants of Ham, one of Noah's sons, a lineage that helped shape the soul of Africa. From the flowing grandeur of the Nile to the towering highlands of Ethiopia, their legacy is inscribed on stone monuments, recorded in ancient scriptures, and kept alive in the oral traditions passed down through generations. This story is not a myth or folk tale. It is a journey through time, grounded in both sacred and historical texts. It draws from the Bible's Genesis, the Book of Jubilees, and revelatory works like From Babylon to Timbuktu. It is a tale that challenges the silence of mainstream history, boldly uncovering a truth that colonial narratives tried to bury. Prepare to explore the biblical and cultural origins of Black and African peoples, a story of beginnings, of brilliance, and of a legacy waiting to be reclaimed. Within the vast tapestry of ancient history, often distorted by colonizers and cleansed by selective retellings, lies the powerful origin story of a people whose influence spanned empires and epochs. According to the Bible, all human life after the Great Flood descends from Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Of these, Ham is most closely associated with Africa and peoples of darker complexion. In Genesis 10, the Table of Nations names Ham's sons, Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan, each of whom gave rise to great civilizations. Cush is connected to the mighty kingdom of Cush, Ethiopia, Nubia, Mizraim to Egypt, Put to Libya, and Canaan to the Levant. In Hebrew and other Semitic tongues, the name Ham is often tied to meanings such as hot, black, or burned. Ancient Jewish traditions and cultural records affirm that Ham's descendants settled in Africa and the surrounding regions. These aren't random associations, they are deeply embedded in the DNA of civilizations that gave the world writing systems, architecture, astronomy, and spiritual wisdom long before the rise of Greece or Rome. Ham's firstborn, Cush, is revered as the forefather of the ancient Kushite Empire, a powerful African kingdom based in what is now Sudan. The Kushites built monumental pyramids, mastered ironwork, and maintained robust spiritual practices that endured for centuries. They were not a peripheral people. They were central to the development of African civilization. Likewise, Mizraim, identified in both the Bible and Semitic traditions, is regarded as the progenitor of ancient Egypt. The fact that Mizr, or Mizraim, remains the Arabic name for Egypt today is more than linguistic coincidence. It is ancestral memory. Despite modern attempts to whitewash Egyptian history, countless archaeological and textual sources reaffirm its African roots. The pharaohs were descendants of Ham. The pyramids, temples, and hieroglyphs were expressions of black genius. These civilizations, Kush and Egypt, stood not only as empires, but as beacons of culture, science, and faith. Their legacy reshaped the ancient world and planted seeds that still grow in modern Africa and the diaspora. One of the most misunderstood parts of this narrative is the infamous Curse of Ham, a passage that has been twisted for centuries to justify the subjugation of African peoples. But let's be clear, the Bible never curses Ham. The curse, as written in Genesis 9, was directed at Canaan, Ham's youngest son, due to a personal family incident involving Noah. Nowhere does it imply divine condemnation of all of Ham's descendants. This misinterpretation has caused centuries of pain, yet its roots lie not in Scripture, but in manipulation. Texts like the Book of Jubilees provide additional context. They describe how Ham objected to Canaan's decision to settle in lands designated for Shem, specifically what would become Israel. This was a territorial conflict, not a racial one. The idea that an entire race was cursed is not only theologically false, but historically damaging. Such distortions of sacred texts have been used as tools of oppression rather than sources of truth. It's time to reclaim these stories with accuracy, depth, and integrity. The legacy of Ham's lineage doesn't end with Egypt or Ethiopia. It stretches deep into the heart of the African continent and beyond. The Berbers of North Africa, the Tuaregs of the Sahara, the Nubians along the Nile, and the ancient kingdoms of Mali and Aksum all carry the echoes of Ham's descendants. Through Kush and Put, this lineage spread culture, language, and commerce across continents. Some traditions even suggest connections between Hamitic peoples and early South Indian civilizations, linked through ancient trade routes and maritime migration. The burial place of Ham remains a mystery. Scholars and oral traditions propose locations ranging from Egypt and Sudan to Ethiopia. The Book of Jubilees tells us Ham was among the first to build post-flood cities, even naming one after his wife, a detail that paints a picture of civilization, not savagery. When we read these ancient texts with cultural and historical awareness, a powerful truth emerges. Africa was never a passive land. It was a birthplace of innovation, leadership, and divine legacy, central to the biblical world and the origins of human society itself. As we close this chapter on the origins of Black and African peoples, a greater truth begins to unfold. History, real history, is far richer than the watered-down versions we've been taught. The scriptures and traditions passed down through millennia tell a story of resilience, faith, and brilliance. The descendants of Ham were builders, leaders, and visionaries. Their civilizations influenced the known.
So my people, my fellow listeners, you can see that the children of Ambazonia are an integral part of the people that have populated the continent of Africa. And Africa is also called the land of Ham. In fact, when Jesus Christ had to stay in Egypt, some portions of scripture say he dwelt in the land of Ham. So Africa was given to the descendants of Ham as their homeland. And so we can trace the origin of the children of Ambazonia back to the people of Ham. And as you heard, we are not a cursed people. We have been ingenious throughout time. Those who have tried to take control of us have distorted history and tried to rob us of the true knowledge of who we are and our potentials. And you can see that as we dwelt in our land, we actually inspired civilizations that actually helped the rest of mankind. A lot of developments around Egypt and all across the land. You even heard about Timbuktu. If you read history, you will hear about the civilizations of Timbuktu and other places. These the children of Ham, and they lived proudly in their territory, in their homeland, lived out their culture and values, and which were very respectable and accomplished great things. Unfortunately, as we say, invaders who coveted the resources of our land, you notice that Africa is the largest continent, has the most resources, as you learn. They were coveting the things that are in Africa, and they tried to compromise our history. They tried to distort it to the point where today some of us don't even recognize where we are from and who we are. And with this presentation, we want to bring back to our knowledge and our consciences and our understanding the dignity of who we truly are, and the fact that we are an integral part of the universe, and we belong where the God who created the universe placed us. And as we live in our homeland proudly, we should have faith and confidence in ourselves and not allow anybody look down on us or consider us as second-class citizens, maybe because they may consider the color of our skin, or maybe they can think that we are not as wealthy, humanly speaking, as they are. We are a people of dignity who dwelt in our land with our heads held high. For some of us who have lived long enough and experienced our traditional cultures in the 60s, you will notice that as time has gone on, our cultural values are being eroded by modern technology with all the iPhones and social media. Most of the youth don't remember the things that our forefathers used to do, things that were practiced in the villages due to traditions that were handed down from our forefathers. And so with this, we try to remind, especially these young people, to understand that we are a people who have lived well, had a great culture, great values, and passed that on to our generations throughout time. And some of us have even written things down. That's why you had the big libraries in Timbuktu. And in Cameroon in particular, you will hear that even the people of Fumban have a writing where they have written their history. But most of our people do oral transmission of that information. If you talk to your local elderly people or the people who dwell around the palaces, the chiefs, they will be able to give you information of the origins of their individual tribes and how they relate to the neighboring tribes. And so we were a great people, and we consider ourselves as having been great rulers. You will hear about the pharaohs of Egypt who did great things. And if you trace back, from me in particular, our tribe people say they migrated from the land of the east, which was around Sudan, and in the land where the chiefs came from. And that's where you would understand the practices around the palaces. So I would like to present a video of the impact of these pharaohs on the land, on the continent of Africa, the land of Ham. Let's watch this video about the pharaohs, the black pharaohs that ruled in the land of Ham.
Lost to civil war. This is not the Egypt you've heard about. This is the story of the black pharaohs, warriors, priests, and kings from Nubia who shocked the ancient world and changed it forever. In the year 730 BCE, a powerful Nubian king named Pa stood at a crossroads in history. The land of Egypt, once mighty, now divided, was drowning in chaos. Warlords battled for control. Sacred temples stood abandoned. The gods, it seemed, had turned their backs. But Pa believed Egypt could be saved, not by negotiation but by conquest. He was the king of Nubia, a land rich in culture, gold, and spiritual power. From his seat in the southern city of Napata, Pa declared, "I will let Lower Egypt taste the taste of my fingers." Pa knew he wasn't just fighting for land, he was fighting for the soul of a civilization. Egypt was more than borders, it was a sacred trust passed down from the gods. He summoned his finest horses, his generals, his priests. They were not merely invading, they were marching north to cleanse the soul of Egypt. As they approached Thebes, the spiritual heart of Upper Egypt, Pa commanded his soldiers to purify themselves. They bathed in the sacred Nile. They dressed in white linen. They sprinkled their bodies with water from the temple of Karnak, home of Amun, Pa's personal god. The river wasn't just water, it was sacred breath. The soldiers whispered prayers. The linen was not just cloth, it was armor of purity. Their spears gleamed in the sunrise. Pa sacrificed animals to the gods. He performed sacred rituals. Only then did he allow his army to engage the enemy. Many of these warlords wore Egyptian crowns, mimicked Egyptian rituals, but their hearts were full of greed. Pa saw through the illusion. He came not just with armies, but with purpose. His campaign lasted nearly a year. One by one, the northern warlords fell. Even the mighty Tefnakt, ruler of the Delta, sent a message in surrender. Be merciful. I cannot face the flame of your power. I tremble before your majesty. Rather than punish them, Pa accepted their offerings. Fine horses, jewelry, temples. Then, in a move that shocked all of Egypt, he returned to Nubia. Victorious, yet humble. His return was symbolic, a rejection of vanity. He reminded Egypt that true kingship is not held in palaces, but in purpose. Pa never ruled from Egypt. He believed his mission was spiritual. When he died in 715 BCE, he was buried in a pyramid in Napata, with his 4 prized horses beside him. He became the first of a powerful line, the Black Pharaohs of the 25th dynasty, Nubian kings who ruled Egypt for more than 75 years, and perhaps saved it from collapse. Their empire stretched from Khartoum in modern-day Sudan to the Mediterranean Sea. They built monuments, they revived temples, they protected Egypt from Assyrian invasions. Some believe they even saved Jerusalem from destruction. Yet for centuries, the world ignored them. Their statues vanished, their names were erased. History books called them outsiders, forgetting that Nubia had shared Nile civilization with Egypt for over 2,500 years. Today, Sudan has more pyramids than Egypt. The ruins of Napata, Nuri, and Meroe whisper the story of a forgotten empire. Napata, Pa's city, wasn't a backwater. It was a spiritual powerhouse. Temples carved into stone, pyramids touching the sky, and priests who memorized the ancient hymns of Ra and Amun. Swiss archaeologist Charles Bonnet remembers arriving in Sudan decades ago. People told him, "You're wasting your time. There's no ancient history here, only Egypt has that." But Bonnet proved them wrong. His team discovered statues of the Black Pharaohs, pyramids, temples, a civilization that rivaled Egypt in art, religion, and wealth. Pa's successors, like Shabaka, Taharqa, and Tantamani, didn't just imitate Egyptian traditions, they strengthened them. Shabaka rewrote ancient texts, preserving knowledge in stone. Taharqa's armies marched as far as Palestine. Tantamani tried to reclaim Egypt after Assyria, brave though doomed. They built in Thebes, they crowned themselves in Memphis. They wore the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, with a twist, the tall Kushite crown with twin cobras, symbolizing dominance over both lands. Taharqa, perhaps the most famous, ruled during a golden age. He defended Egypt from Assyria. He funded monumental architecture in Karnak and Luxor, and he embraced Egyptian religion so deeply that some priests said the Nubians were more faithful than the Egyptians themselves. The Black Pharaohs reshaped Egypt's soul. They revitalized the cult of Amun, not just as a god, but as a divine force that united nations. Under their rule, temples in Napata rivaled those in Thebes. Art and architecture blended Egyptian and Nubian styles. Powerful statues with distinctly African features, murals rich with desert ochres and deep blues. They also redefined leadership, merging warrior strength with spiritual duty. Pa, the founder, began every military campaign not with a sword, but with a prayer. And even in retreat, They carried Egyptian traditions south, seeding a new era of Nubian culture that would thrive for centuries. Today, their pyramids still rise in the sands of Sudan, smaller than Giza's but no less proud. Their story is no longer a footnote. It's a reminder that black kings once ruled Egypt, not as invaders, but as restorers of its spirit.
And so, my people, as you can see, that is the origin of our people along the Nile River, from Sudan all the way down to, as they call it, Lower Egypt, where you have the Delta of Egypt. Our great people, the children of Ham, grew around that area, multiplied, and had great rulers who basically held in their control not only the authority to control the population, but also the spiritual power, which you see reflected in the palaces that we have in our local tribes. If you go back to our regions, our local communities, you will notice the pyramidal structure that you see there in some of the buildings in the palaces, especially in Bamileke land, but also particularly all across the areas of Amazona. You will see structures that look like these pyramids. You will also notice that our leaders have a sense of authority and political power around them, and also spiritual authority. These were traditions that were brought down from these powerful kings in Egypt. And so as the population continued to increase in number, the people started spreading out all across Africa. And originally, the Sahara Desert used to be a fertile territory where people could harvest food. And you had the big Lake Chad. That was a big water source where there was a lot of life. The land feature determined the migration of the people going all across the land of Africa for thousands of years, tracing all the way through the west as well as through the south. And as they were going, they were looking for places where they could have something to eat, and also how they could take good care of themselves and have safety and protection. In my particular tribe, I remember when we migrated to our current location, it was primarily because we thought it was a good fertile land to harvest food and also be protected by the surrounding mountains from all enemies. And so we want to present the migration of our people across the land of Ham. You will notice what motivated people to move. And this led our people to move to their current locations. Each of us has a tribe or a group of people we identify with who speak one language. They have cultural values, and they're settled in a specific land territory. And some have been there for thousands of years. Some have been there for hundreds of years, like over 600-700 years, like the Bansa people. And some have been there for 400-500 years, like my own people. And some not too long. But we want to see in the next presentation how the mobility, the migration of the people across the land of Ham happened and why. So let's watch this video and we'll continue the discussion.
Of what impact does the environment have on human migration? And we have a couple specific examples here, and before we dig into those, I want to make a few broader points about the environment as a historical factor. And the first of those is simply that the environment does have impacts on what people are able to do, on how and where they're able to move. We might be looking at, is the climate suitable for practicing agriculture? Food production is such an important part of human movement and human survival in new environments. We might look at transportation. In the Pacific Ocean, for example, getting from island to island requires that you have technology that allows you to travel over the ocean for long distances. The second point to consider more broadly is that human beings, when they move to new areas, tend to have impacts on the environment. So if they're bringing new plants or new animals to a place where they haven't previously existed, that's going to have some impacts on the new place. And finally, this isn't to say that the environment is wholly explanatory of why history played out the way it did, but we also don't want to dismiss the environment as a potential explanatory factor. So with those bigger points in mind, let's start by looking at a specific example in Africa known as the Bantu migration, or more often the Bantu expansion into sub-Saharan Africa. And when I say sub-Saharan Africa, that's just the region of Africa that is south of the Sahara Desert. And I'll shade that in here so that you can see where I'm talking about. And next what I have is an overlay in yellow that shows the areas of Africa where a Bantu language is the predominant language spoken. So the question that raises is, why does so much of sub-Saharan Africa speak a Bantu language? There aren't any written records of Bantu speakers and how they moved and what they were thinking when they did move, but there is evidence in terms of how the languages relate to one another, and there's also archaeological evidence. And one of the helpful things about studying the Bantu expansion is that from about 500, 400 BCE on, they were using iron tools. They had iron making technology, and those tools, along with pottery that's distinctive to Bantu speaking cultures, can help archaeologists trace how Bantu speakers spread throughout Africa over time. So linguists who have studied how these languages relate to one another, and archaeologists who have looked at evidence of how Bantu speakers migrated and moved throughout Africa are fairly confident that they originated somewhere here in West Africa and from there spread to the south as well as to the east over to what's known as the Great Lakes region of Africa, and then from there farther south again. So that tells us how people moved through Africa. What pattern did they follow? The next question we want to try and figure out the answer to is, why did they migrate to the places that they did? Well, one thing that we know about Bantu-speaking peoples is that they tended to have fairly consistent and common agricultural practices. And among the crops that they were growing were millet and sorghum. Once they got to the Great Lakes region and started moving south, you also see them adopting cattle herding. Pictures of the cattle that they would have probably had here. And what these crops and these cattle have in common, all of them tend to thrive in what's known as a tropical savanna or a semi-tropical savanna climate. And sub-Saharan Africa, with the exception of this rainforest region here and this high desert down in the south, is largely tropical or semi-tropical savanna. And when we put the overlay back up of where Bantu speakers are the majority, we can see that sort of corresponds with those climate variations. You see them populate really all of the areas that are favorable to their agricultural practices. And that should make sense. If we think about migration as a risk-reward calculation, you need to make sure that any place that you're migrating to is going to be able to provide you with food. So to bring that back to our big theme of how does environment impact migration, we really see in the Bantu expansion the role of climate affecting what kind of agriculture is possible, and that determines what areas look attractive for migration. So the next region we want to look at, the next migration we want to study, is that of people moving throughout the Pacific Islands. You can see the path this migration probably took here. And when we talk about expansion in the Pacific, we're looking at something somewhat similar to the Bantu expansion in Africa, in that, again, we don't have any written records from the people who moved here. So again, we're relying on linguistic or language-based evidence as well as archaeological evidence. And this evidence helps us sort of divide up the Pacific into three distinct regions. So we have what's called Melanesia in blue, and Micronesia in red, and Polynesia in purple. And again, these are all people who were originally speaking some form of Austronesian language.
So, my people, you can see that migration has occurred across the land of Ham, the continent of Africa, for thousands of years. You can notice that the Bantu migration that started around where you have the northwest region of Amazonia, you know, the Bamenda area there, started around 2000 before Common Era, or that is before Jesus Christ was born. So before Common Era is before Jesus Christ, and Common Era is after Jesus was born. So for thousands of years, our people have lived in our continent and migrated and moved from place to place, as you noticed, looking for a better environment for food, security, and sometimes actually to relocate close to relatives. You know, when a relative moves far away, Africans are social beings. They like to go be by their family members. Then some people will move and go live by some relatives that have moved further away. So that's how our people migrated for thousands of years all across Africa. And during this process of mobility, they met animals in the African safari. So you notice if you some programs, you notice that there are all kinds of animals in the African mainland. You notice the cattle; these are domesticated animals. But you also had wildlife, tigers and lions and elephants. And as our people were migrating, they were enthralled or impressed by the strength and power of these animals, like a lion or like a tiger, which is a very efficient hunter that runs and hides up a tree. And then you also notice the elephant, which is a very mighty animal that is difficult to overcome. The reason I bring this out is because you notice that in our culture, some of our people tend to revere these properties of these animals. That's why you notice that when you go to our traditional palaces, you will see the king being depicted as a lion, or they draw a lion. Or you will notice that he sits and puts his feet, that means the ruler, on the skin of a tiger to give the impression that he's an expert hunter like a tiger. In fact, in some of those cultures, they made sure that anybody who hunted and killed any of these animals must bring the skin to the palace. I will come back to how the chieftaincy evolved. But basically, the people were impressed with the characteristics of these animals to survive in the African savannah. You also notice, especially in Bamileke homeland, how they like to, human beings like to dress up looking like elephants with those long tucks in front of them. It's just because the people were impressed with the animal properties and strengths that they want to assume that I have the strength of a lion, I have the strength of a tiger, or I have the strength of an elephant. You also notice that our palace chiefs, they like to drink out of the horn of a buffalo, so we never wasted things. So when animals died, like a buffalo, we took the horn. You know, a buffalo is a very strong, mighty animal. It can even kill a lion with its horns. And so they will use the horn and shape it into a cup that you drink from. And so you notice again the characteristics of trying to assume the properties and strengths of these animals. Even the other smaller animals like the porcupines that have spikes, you notice they protect themselves by piercing the animals that are trying to hunt them with those spikes. And you find some of our chiefs trying to take those spikes and put it on the caps that they put on their heads to assume the qualities of those spikes. And even snakes, you will find some of them. You saw those pharaohs of Egypt, they had snakes on their forehead on what they put upon themselves. They were assuming the characteristics of a snake. But basically, as our people went across the land of Ham, across the continent of Africa, they met all these different animals in their journey. And so they tried to practice the characteristics of this animal. One thing that we may forget is that today's society has changed so fast. We have motorable roads. These cars were only developed less than 150 years ago. Remember, we're talking about the Bantu migration that started 2000 before Jesus Christ was born. So we never had cars. We never had roads that cars could pry on. And then we even have aeroplanes today where people can fly in. In those days, we never had planes. So people used to walk on footpaths. They walk primarily on foot. They use sticks as support tools, especially for the elderly while they were walking. And they had to climb high mountains. And you know, the young dynamic people will easily run and climb mountains, but the elderly will not be able to. They had to cross big rivers, like you talk about the Nile. You have major rivers, the Niger River, the Congo River, so many other rivers, the Zambezi. The people had to cross those rivers, and not everybody could swim. But those geographic features basically determine the migration of people to their current locations. As concerns the children of Amazonia, if you take time to study the geographic features of the territory of Africa, you will notice there are different mountain ranges. The second tallest mountain in Africa is in the land of Amazonia called Mount Fako. And this, if that mountain is in a mountain range that starts actually in the Atlantic Ocean, and if you dry up the ocean, you will see the mountains there. Under the ocean, you have several mountains which people don't see because they are submerged under the water. But anyway, the mountain range goes right from the Atlantic Ocean across the land of Amazonia. You have Mount Cameroon in Bakosi land. You have the Twin Lakes with mountains. You go through Kupe Manenguba, Lobialem. You come through Meta territory, that's Momo. And then you go across through Mezam and Goketunjia, Okulan, and Bansot territory. And this mountain range curves like a sea reaching out to Adamawa region. The reason I am bringing this out is to bring out the territorial migration and settlements within the territory of Amazonia. As people were migrating across Africa, we know that the Bantu migration started from around the northwest region, Bamileke territory, and went across like we showed depicted. But also, people kept moving back and forth. And so as people were migrating, again from the Nile region, some went across Lake Chad Basin, which was flat, all the way to West Africa, reaching towards Senegal, and then we're reaching down towards the ocean. That means the Atlantic Ocean. And those territories, you hear about the big kingdoms of Ghana, as well as in Nigeria, you have several territories like Benin and the Yoruba nations. Those people went across there and then were going down towards the ocean. As far as the territory of Amazonia is concerned, some of the people were not able to go across the Lake Chad Basin. They rather came to the Adamawa Plateau, which is around Gaundare, and then entered the lower territories of this mountain range that I just talked about. So the mountain range separates two groups of people. You have those that are living east of the mountain range, and you have those that are living west of the mountain range. So west of the mountain range, you will find people like the people of Manu. They are totally different, and you notice that their cultural identity is almost resembling those of the Igbos, because they are more ethnically related. If you go to Donga and Mantong division, you will find some people that are also related more towards people that are living in those areas of Nigeria. And so you notice that these people that entered through Adamawa Plateau and entered the land of Amazonia, they are regarded as the Tikar people that are ethnically related to, say, the Bamlikes. They came from the north, wandered through the savannah territory with all those animals, and you see them worshipping those figurines. Now, we also learned about the migration of the Bantus and also territories, people that migrated along the Rift Valley to South Africa. But as they entered the Congo Basin, so they couldn't reach, they couldn't go into the Atlantic Ocean because it became a landmark of where the migration ended. And so some of them started migrating back up north across the ocean front. And so you will notice that the people who live around the Atlantic Ocean, like the people of Douala and the people of Bakweret, going right down to Ndian, they are ethnically, culturally, and by practices different from those that came from the north. You'll notice that they tend to worship those that they revere as gods in the oceans, while those people that came from the north tend to worship either animal figurines or land features like some lakes or mountains. But anyway, I just wanted to bring out here the migration of our people across Africa through time, thousands of years to our current location. And so we have lived in where we are now. For some of us, you trace from the palaces just hundreds of years, like for me, 400 or 500 years. For the people of Bansot, they can trace back to 1300 and so forth. But some of them have we have migrated across Africa for over 2,000-3,000 of years. And so subsequently, we will be talking about what has happened to us when foreigners, different people who don't know us, reportedly discovered us, in the sense that they came to discover that there was a distinct territory different from what they know, and they discovered they say the Niger River, which our people were using, or they discovered the Zambezi River, or they discovered the Nile River. We have been living around the Nile. We have been living across all of these features. They're an integral part of who we are. These foreigners came to our territory and saw it for the first time and wrote in their books that they discovered it, but we have been living and enjoying them. And so subsequently, we will go into the history of Ambazonia, what has truly happened to us when these foreigners, predominantly white-skinned individuals, came to our territory, and narrate how they have impacted how we are today. Now, the story goes even deeper into northern portions of the sub-Saharan region, that means south of the Sahara, when the Muslims came across and took some of our people. That one is a separate story. I will not go deep into that because it needs a lot of investigation to bring out the facts. But I do know a lot of information about when the Caucasians, the whites from Western Europe, came in ships across the Atlantic Ocean and settled along the borders of African continent, and then discovered our people for the first time and started interacting with us. And now from there, we will give details of what has happened through time, through their impact to where we are today and what we're going through. And as time permits, we'll be able to predict what is going to us, because our future is great, just as our past was great, and as God blessed us in our territory, the territory belongs to us, and we will stay there and enjoy it as God has given us. That is where my program today will end, and will continue subsequently. Thank you very much.
Sovereign silhouette, the emblem of Ambazonia. From the azure embrace of the Atlantic reflecting from the Ambas Bay, the iconic Fako Mountain ascends with a silent, stoic grace, carving a silhouette against the sky. This towering sentinel is more than a geographical marvel. It is the heart of southern Cameroons, the stoic guardian of Ambazonia, a symbol steadfast as the unyielding spirit manifests in the unity of the land's 13 counties.